The muzzle flash lit up the tree line like lightning. Sergeant Alicia Morgan froze, her boots sinking into Afghan mud as the crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley. Time slowed. Her squad dropped to the ground in practice formation, but she remained standing, eyes locked on a flicker of movement no one else had seen. Without thinking, she raised her rifle, adjusted for wind, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The silence that followed seemed endless. "What the hell are you shooting at, Morgan?" her squad leader hissed from the dirt. She didn't answer, couldn't answer. The weight of what she'd just done on her first patrol beyond the wire crashed over her like a wave. That wasn't a training target. That was a person. Maybe more than one. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 years later, Alicia stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen, the hiring application for Atlanta PD, incomplete and forgotten. Outside her apartment window, rain tapped against glass, the steady rhythm matching the throbbing in her temples. A half-empty cup of coffee sat cold beside a stack of rejection letters from police departments across 3 states. No one wanted to hire the woman who'd become both legend and liability in the same breath. The woman whose first combat action had uncovered a sniper nest that would have killed her entire squad. The woman who, despite saving 12 lives that day, had made powerful enemies with her testimony about what happened afterward. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "Taylor needs you. Soon." Alicia's heart stopped. Captain James Taylor had been her commanding officer during that deployment. The man who'd pinned a medal on her chest with the cameras rolling, then whispered that her career was over the moment the reporters left. She hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. She tapped the message, searching for more information, but there was nothing. Just those 4 words from a number with no history. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before she typed, "Who is this?" No response came. Alicia stood and crossed to the window, pushing aside the cheap blinds to look at the rain slick street below. Her apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a forgettable part of town, the kind of place where neighbors didn't ask questions and rent could be paid in cash. It had been home for 11 months, the longest she'd stayed anywhere since leaving the military. On her dresser, a framed photograph sat face down, the only decoration in the sparse room. She hadn't looked at it in months, but she knew every detail by heart. 5 soldiers grinning beneath the Afghan sun, arms around each other's shoulders. The woman on the left, barely 22, then had dirt on her cheeks and light in her eyes that had long since gone out. The phone buzzed again. Different number, same message. "Taylor needs you. Soon." This time she didn't respond. Instead, she walked to her closet and pulled out the footlocker she'd kept locked since coming home. The key was on her keychain, small and unremarkable next to her apartment and car keys. It turned with a click that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Inside, beneath neatly folded uniforms she'd never wear again, was a small case. She lifted it carefully, setting it on her bed before opening the clasps. The pistol inside was clean, oiled, maintained with the same precision she'd once applied to everything in her life. She checked the action, the magazine, the sights movements. So familiar they required no thought. Another buzz from her phone. A 3rd number, Warehouse District. Building 17.2100 hours. Alicia checked her watch. 3 hours. She had 3 hours to decide if she was walking into a trap or answering a call for help from a man who'd betrayed her. Either way, she wouldn't go unprepared. She showered quickly, letting hot water wash away the lingering headache. As she dressed, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, a stranger looking back at her, dark circles under wary eyes. Hair cut short for practicality rather than style. A thin scar along her jawline from shrapnel, that had nearly taken her life 2 years after the sniper incident. By the time she left her apartment, the rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected streetlights like shattered stars. Her car was nothing special, a 10-year-old sedan with enough miles to circle the earth twice. It started on the second try, the engine protesting before settling into its familiar rumble. The warehouse district was 30 minutes across town, a collection of abandoned buildings waiting for developers to transform them into overpriced lofts. Building 17 stood at the far end, partially hidden by a rusting chain-link fence. No security. Guards, no cameras, just empty windows like blind eyes watching her approach. Alicia parked 2 blocks away, tucking her pistol into a shoulder holster beneath her jacket. The weight was comforting, a reminder of skills that hadn't faded despite years of disuse. She walked the remaining distance, senses alert for any sign of surveillance or danger. The side door to Building 17 was unlocked. That could mean an invitation. Or an ambush. She pushed it open slowly, staying low and to the side as she entered. The interior was dark except for a single light burning at the far end of a massive empty space. Metal support beams created shadows like prison bars across the concrete floor. "Close the door," a voice called from near the light. Female, unfamiliar. Alicia didn't move. "Who are you?" "Someone who served with Taylor. Someone who knows what happened 6 years ago." The voice was calm, professional. "Please close the door. We don't have much time." Alicia kicked the door shut behind her without taking her eyes off the distant light. As she approached, details emerged from shadow, a folding table with maps and photographs spread across its surface. A laptop, with satellite imagery playing in a continuous loop. 3 people waiting in silence. The woman who had spoken stood at the center of the group, her posture military straight, despite civilian clothes. "Lieutenant Sarah Chun," she said without offering her hand. "This is Martinez and Wilson. We all served under Taylor at different times." Martinez nodded from where he leaned against a support beam, arms crossed over his chest. He was built like a linebacker, with hands that looked like they could bend steel. Wilson sat behind the laptop, eyes never leaving the screen, fingers tapping in a regular rhythm on the table's edge. "Why am I here?" Alicia asked, keeping her distance. Chun gestured to the photographs. "Because Taylor's missing, and you're the only one who might be able to find him." Alicia approached cautiously, studying the images spread across the table. Surveillance photos, satellite imagery, terrain maps of mountains she recognized all too well. Afghanistan? 3 weeks ago, Taylor was working private security for an NGO medical team near the Pakistan border, Chen explained. His convoy was hit. Everyone else was killed, but there was no body at Taylor's position. Just blood and drag marks leading away from the site. Martinez spoke up, his voice a low rumble. "Official report says he's presumed dead, case closed. But we received this 2 days ago." He reached over and tapped a key on the laptop. The screen changed to show a video-grainy, unstable footage of a man being led through a mountain camp. The quality was poor, but Alicia recognized Taylor immediately. His face was bruised, one arm hanging uselessly at his side, but he was alive, being moved by men whose faces were carefully hidden from the camera. This was sent to his wife through encrypted channels, Wilson said, speaking for the first time. His voice was higher than expected, with a slight southern accent. No demands, no communication. Just proof of life and coordinates for a meeting point. "Why me?" Alicia asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I haven't spoken to Taylor in years. We didn't exactly part on good terms." Chun's expression remained neutral. "Because you're the only one who can make the shot if it comes to that. Because you're not on anyone's radar anymore. Because despite everything that happened, Taylor trusted you. Trusted me." Alicia laughed, the sound harsh in the empty warehouse. "He hung me out to dry. Made me the scapegoat for an operation. That went sideways because of his orders. And yet here you are, Chun observed. Alicia fell silent, eyes returning to the photographs. The mountain range was familiar, the same region where she'd taken that first shot 6 years ago. The same. Valleys and ridgelines where she'd learned what war really meant. What exactly are you asking me to do? She finally asked. Martinez straightened from his relaxed posture. We're going in unofficially. No government support, no extraction plan if things go bad. Just us, trying to bring home one of our own. The meeting point is here, Wilson said, pointing to a mark on one of the maps. Remote village, minimal population. Our intel suggests Taylor is being held approximately 12 kilometers away in this compound. The meeting is likely a trap. What's the play? Alicia asked, professional curiosity overriding her reservations. Chun smiled for the first time, a tight, predatory expression. We make them think we're walking into their trap while setting our own. Martinez and I will approach as instructed. Wilson handles communications and coordinates with our local assets. You provide overwatch from this ridge, 3 kilometers out. Alicia examined the position. Perfect sight lines to both the meeting point and the suspected holding location. Difficult approach, but defensible if things went bad. The kind of position that would require someone with very specific skills. 3 kilometers is a hell of a shot, she said quietly. Yes, Chun agreed. It is. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Can you still make it? Alicia hadn't fired a rifle at that distance since leaving the service. Hadn't wanted to, hadn't needed to. But her body remembered the breathing pattern, the minute adjustments, the perfect stillness required. Some skills never truly fade. When do we leave? She asked. Tonight, Chun replied. Transport's already arranged. We have gear, weapons, everything you'll need. Just like that? No time to think it over? Martinez shrugged massive shoulders. Taylor doesn't have time. Alicia turned away from the table, pacing a few steps as her mind raced through possibilities. This was insane. Unofficial extraction on foreign soil, working with people she'd just met, risking everything for a man who'd betrayed her. Every logical part of her brain screamed to walk away. But the image of Taylor, beaten, wounded, but alive, stayed with her. Whatever had happened between them, he'd been her commander, her mentor once, before politics and ambition poisoned everything. I need to know what really happened, she said, turning back to face them, after I took out that sniper nest. The official report was sanitized beyond recognition. Taylor never told me the whole story. Chun exchanged glances with the others before nodding slowly. That's fair, Wilson. Wilson tapped at his keyboard, bringing up a new file. The short version is that your shot exposed more than just a sniper. Team. The men you took out were operating under protection from certain elements within both governments. People who were profiting from keeping that region destabilized. Taylor tried to pursue it through official channels, Martinez added. Tried to get recognition for what you'd done. But the higher he pushed, the harder they pushed back. So he sacrificed me to save his own career, Alicia said bitterly. No, Chun corrected. He sacrificed your career to keep you alive. There were 3 other soldiers from your unit who asked the same questions you did. All 3 died in accidents within 18 months. Alicia felt cold despite the warm night. And Taylor? Kept his head down, played the game, worked his way into positions where he could gather evidence, Wilson explained. We think that's why he was targeted. He finally found proof of who was behind it all. Preparing and narrating this story took US a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alicia walked to the window, looking out at the darkened warehouses beyond. Her reflection stared back, a woman at a crossroads, the past reaching out with demands she'd never expected to face again. "I'm not the same person." "I was," she said quietly. "I haven't held a sniper rifle in 3 years." "But you're still the woman who made that shot," Chun said. "The woman who saw what no one else could see and acted without hesitation." "That doesn't go away." Alicia turned back to them. "If I do this, if I need to know everything. No compartmentalization, no need-to-know basis. I want all the intel, all the connections, everything Taylor was working on." Chun nodded without hesitation. "Done. And afterward, I disappear again. My involvement stays completely off the record." "Of course." Alicia took a deep breath, decision made. "Show me what you've got." For the next hour, they briefed her on everything: the political landscape, the tribal alliances, the suspected captors, and the extraction plan. It was both familiar and foreign, like returning to a hometown that had changed in your absence. Wilson provided high-resolution satellite imagery of the target areas, annotated with patrol schedules and defensive positions. Martinez walked her through the weapons and equipment they'd procured, top-tier gear that raised questions about their funding that no one offered to answer. Chun outlined the extraction plan with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Multiple contingencies, backup routes, emergency protocols. Whatever this team was, they were professionals. "Wheels up in 90 minutes, Chun concluded. "Any questions?" Alicia had dozens, but only one that mattered. "Why does Taylor think I'll help him after everything that happened?" For the first time, Chun's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "He doesn't know we've contacted you. This was our call, not his." "Then why?" "Because he never stopped trying to clear your name," Martinez interrupted. "Every report, every debrief, every opportunity, he kept pushing your case up the chain until they threatened his family to shut him up." Wilson turned his laptop toward her. On the screen was an official letterhead she recognized, the kind used for commendation reviews and award recommendations. Taylor's signature at the bottom, dated 3 months ago. "He's been submitting this. Same letter every quarter for 5 years, Wilson explained. "Requesting review of your case and formal recognition of your actions that day." Alicia read the first paragraph, then had to look away, emotion threatening to break through the careful walls she'd built. The words were burned into her memory. Instantly, Specialist Morgan's actions demonstrated courage and perception beyond her experience level, resulting in the preservation of 12 American lives while exposing an enemy position that intelligence had failed to identify. "Every submission was denied," Chun said quietly. "But he never stopped trying." Alicia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The warehouse seemed suddenly too small, the air too thick with implications and revised histories. "I need 10 minutes," she said finally, alone. The others nodded, gathering their equipment with the efficiency of people accustomed to rapid deployments. They moved toward a side room, leaving her with the maps and photographs in her thoughts. When they were gone, Alicia sank into the folding chair Wilson had vacated. Her hands were steady as she picked up the nearest photograph, an aerial view of mountains she'd once known better than her hometown streets. Valleys where she'd walked with a rifle and a rucksack, watching shadows for movement and rooftops for snipers. She'd been so young then, 22 and certain of everything, her skills, her purpose, her place in the world. One shot had changed all of that. One perfect shot that had saved lives and destroyed her own. Now Taylor needed her to make another shot. From farther away, with higher stakes, years of rust on her skills, the rational choice was clear. Walk away, drive home, forget this night had ever happened. Return to applications and interviews and the struggle to build something from the ruins of her former life. Alicia reached into her jacket pocket and removed a small metal object, a bullet casing polished to a high shine and attached to a leather cord. She'd carried it every day since Afghanistan, a reminder of both what she'd accomplished and what It had cost her the first round she'd ever fired in combat. The one that had taken out the spotter in that hidden nest, revealing their position before the snipers could open fire on her unsuspecting squad. She rolled it between her fingers, feeling the weight of brass and memory. Then she slipped it back into her pocket and stood, decision made. Chun looked up as she entered the side room. "Are you in?" Alicia nodded once. "I'm in, but not for Taylor." "For the truth." "Fair enough," Chun replied. "Grab your gear. Transport leaves in 30. The helicopter waiting on the abandoned airfield was civilian, unmarked, with modifications that spoke of specialized use. The pilot nodded to Chun, but asked no questions as they loaded equipment and themselves into the cramped interior. As the rotors spun up to a deafening roar, Alicia felt a familiar tension coiling at the base of her spine, the sensation of crossing a threshold from which there was no return. She'd felt it before, stepping onto that first patrol 6 years ago, not knowing that her life would forever be divided into before and after that single shot. Now she was crossing another threshold, returning to a world she'd thought she'd left behind. For a man she'd once respected, then hated, and now wasn't sure how to feel about it all. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to the east as lights from the city fell away beneath them. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. In 12 hours, they would be in Afghanistan. In 24, they would either have Taylor back or be dead themselves. Alicia closed her eyes, let her head rest against the vibrating fuselage, and began the mental preparation she hadn't needed in years. Calculating wind values, memorizing terrain features, reviewing the principles of extreme long-range marksmanship. The knowledge was still there, waiting to be accessed. One shot had defined her life. Another might redefine it, or end it altogether. Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers finding the smooth brass casing, as the helicopter carried her back toward a path she'd never truly escaped. The mountains of Afghanistan were exactly as Alicia remembered. Jagged, unforgiving, ancient beyond comprehension. They rose like broken teeth against the dawn sky as the helicopter approached the landing zone, a small clearing 8 miles from the nearest village and 20 from their target. She stood at the open door, wind whipping her face, taking in the landscape that had shaped her into both hero and outcast. Below, shadows still clung to valleys where American blood had soaked into sand, where her own life had changed forever with 3 pulls of a trigger. 2 minutes, the pilot called. Over the intercom. Chun nodded, performing final checks on her gear. Martinez adjusted his pack, face impassive beneath his beard. Wilson was already working, tablet in hand, checking satellite uplinks and communication channels. Everyone focused, professional, ready for whatever came next. The helicopter touched. Down with barely a bump, rotors still spinning as they disembarked. No words, just practiced efficiency as they unloaded equipment and moved clear of the landing zone. Within 30 seconds, they were crouched among rocks as the aircraft lifted away, leaving them alone in the vast silence of the mountains. "Communications check," Wilson said, passing out encrypted radios. "Channel 3 is primary, 7 is backup. Calsigns only from this point forward." Alicia clipped the radio to her vest, adjusted her headset, and spoke quietly. "Overwatch is operational." "Command copies," Chun replied, studying a handheld GPS. 2-day hike to the observation point. Let's move out." They traveled light but prepared. Each carried essentials: water, ammunition, medical supplies, communications. Martinez took point, moving with surprising grace for his size. Chun followed. Then Wilson, with Alicia bringing up the rear, watching their backs with the wariness of someone who knew how quickly safety could become danger in these mountains. The first day passed in near silence, conversation limited to necessary communication about terrain and movement. They avoided main trails, staying to rocky ground where they left minimal trace of their passage. By nightfall, They'd covered 11 miles of brutal landscape, climbing steadily toward the ridgeline that would serve as Alicia's position. Camp was cold rations and no fire, huddled in the lee of a rock formation that blocked the worst of the wind. They ate quickly before Chun unfolded a detailed map across her knees. "We're here," she said, marking their position with a finger. "Meeting point is here, scheduled for 1600 hours tomorrow. Suspected holding location is here. Overwatch position gives line of sight to both." Alicia studied the terrain, calculating angles and distances. Wind will be tricky. These valleys create unpredictable patterns. Martinez nodded. "Local weather report shows clear conditions, but there's always that afternoon gust that comes through these passes." "I'll compensate," Alicia said simply. Wilson looked up from his tablet. "Our window is narrow. The exchange is supposed to be Taylor for a hard drive containing intelligence files. Once they realize we don't have what they want, things will move fast." "You're sure the drive doesn't exist?" Alicia asked. Chun's expression hardened. Taylor would never have compiled physical evidence. Too dangerous. The drive is just bait to draw us in. So what's the real play? "We approach as instructed, 2 people only, unarmed. They'll expect us to have hidden backup, so they'll have their own. You identify and neutralize their overwatch, then their shooters. We extract Taylor during the confusion." It sounded simple. It wasn't. Every one of them knew the countless ways this could go wrong, the variables beyond their control, the razor-thin margins between success and disaster. "Get some sleep," Chun ordered. 4-hour rotations on watch. We move at first light. Alicia took first watch, sitting with her back against cold stone, rifle across her knees. The stars above were brilliant in the clear mountain air, unchanged from when she'd last seen them from this part of the world. She found the familiar constellation's navigation points she'd memorized during lonely nights on patrol. When Martinez came to relieve her, he brought a cup of instant coffee, the heat welcome against her cold hands. "You good?" he asked, settling. Beside her, Alicia nodded. "Been a while since I slept on rocks." He smiled slightly. "Like riding a bike. The uncomfortable parts come right back." They sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I was there, in your AO when it happened. Different unit, but we heard about it. The shot that saved Baker Company." Alicia stiffened. She'd grown accustomed to civilians who knew nothing of her past. Hearing it acknowledged so directly was jarring. 3 targets, 3 shots over 500 meters, Martinez continued. Became something of a legend. Then suddenly your name was mud, and no one would talk about why. "Ancient history," she said flatly. Martinez shrugged massive shoulders. "Maybe, maybe not." Taylor thought it was connected to what got him grabbed. Alicia turned to look at him, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" "The files he was after, they go back 6 years. Same region, same players. Whatever you stumbled into then, he was still pulling threads from it when he disappeared." "Sleep forgotten?" Alicia asked. "Who exactly is holding him? Officially? Insurgent group with ties to local warlords. Unofficially? Someone with enough influence to scrub satellite coverage and bury after-action reports. Someone who wants whatever Taylor found to stay buried." The implications settled over her like a cold fog. For 6 years, she'd believed her career was destroyed by bad luck and politics. Now it seemed more deliberate, more sinister part of something larger that was still unfolding. "Get some rest," Martinez said, taking the rifle from her hands. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by fragmented dreams of her first patrol, the weight of her gear, the dust in her throat, the moment when something at the edge of her vision had caught her attention. A glint of metal where no metal should be, a shadow that moved wrong against the hillside. Details no one else had noticed until she'd fired those 3 perfect shots. Dawn broke cold and clear, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. They broke camp efficiently, erasing all signs of their presence before continuing their journey. The terrain grew more challenging as they climbed loose shale that shifted underfoot, narrow passes where they moved single file, exposed ridgelines, where they crawled to avoid silhouetting against the sky. By midday, they reached the split-off point. Ahead, a narrow spine of rock led to the plateau that would serve as Alicia's position. Chun and Martinez would continue down into the valley, circling around to approach the meeting point from the expected direction. Communication check at each hour mark, Chun instructed. Final positions by 1500. Wilson, you'll set up relay here. Wilson nodded, already unpacking his equipment, directional antennas and signal boosters that would ensure they stayed connected despite the mountains between them. Chun turned to Alicia. Once we're in the village, we'll be offline until the exchange begins. If something happens before then, I'll see it, Alicia finished. Something of her old confidence had returned during the night, the muscle memory of operations past settling into her movements. Chun held her gaze for a moment, then nodded once. Good hunting, Overwatch. Alicia watched them descend, 3 figures growing smaller against the vast landscape, before turning toward her own path. The ridge was a knife edge of stone, barely wide enough in places for secure footing. She moved carefully, testing each step, rifle case strapped securely to her back. The observation post was perfect, a natural formation of rocks creating a hollow, invisible from below while providing clear lines of sight to both the village and the compound where Taylor was supposedly held. She set up methodically, unfolding a shooting mat, assembling her rifle with practiced movements that came back to her hands without conscious thought. The weapon was top-tier, custom-built precision rifle with a carbon fiber barrel and advanced optics. She checked every component, adjusting the bipod, settling the stock against her shoulder to confirm the fit. Then she began her calculations range. Cards for key positions, wind indicators, elevation adjustments. 3 kilometers to the village, nearly 4 to the compound. Extreme range for most shooters, but distances she'd mastered years ago. The question wasn't whether she could make the shots, but whether she should, whether helping the man who'd betrayed her was worth the cost of returning to this life. Even briefly, too late for doubts now. She was here, on mission, with lives, depending on her skill. Whatever reckoning waited with Taylor would come after. Alicia adjusted her scope, focusing on the village. Life continued there, seemingly untouched by the drama about to unfold. Women carrying water, children playing in dusty streets, old men sitting in patches of shade. Normal people caught in the crosshairs of larger forces, just as they had been for generations. At the scheduled check-in, she keyed her radio. Overwatch in position. Command copies, Chun's voice replied. On approach to village, ETA 40 minutes. Relay established, Wilson added. Satellite shows no unusual activity at either location. Alicia continued her surveillance, scanning methodically for anything out of place. A rooftop that offered too good a view of the central square. Windows with angles on approach routes. Shadows that might conceal observers. They're on the southern edge of the village. A building slightly taller than its neighbors, with a clear line of sight to the meeting point. She zoomed in, studying the rooftop. Nothing visible, but the angle of the shadow suggested a recessed area where someone could position themselves unseen from ground level. She marked it as a potential threat and continued scanning. 2 more positions identified themselves to her trained eye: a window in a building across from the square, and what appeared to be a modified animal pen with unusual sight lines to all approach routes. Slowly, methodically, she built a mental map of the battlefield that would soon erupt. Threat positions, cover options, escape routes. The village transformed from a collection of homes into a tactical puzzle with pieces already in motion. Command approaching outer perimeter, Chun reported. Radio silence begins now unless emergency. Copy, Alicia replied. 3 potential overwatch positions identified. Marked and tracked. She settled into wait, controlling her breathing, staying hydrated, maintaining the perfect stillness that had once been as natural to her as walking. The afternoon sun beat down on her position, but she ignored the discomfort. Focus narrowed. To her scope and the scene unfolding below, an hour passed. Then another. Movement at the village edge caught her attention. Chun and Martinez, walking openly along the main road, hands visible, approaching the square where the exchange was to take place. They moved with deliberate casualness, but Alicia could read the tension in their posture even at this distance. Almost simultaneously, her scope caught movement at one of the threat positions, the recessed rooftop. A figure in local dress, but with distinctly non-local equipment. A spotter setting up to watch the exchange. Where there was a spotter, there was a shooter. Alicia scanned nearby positions, finding nothing until she widened her search radius. They're in a building slightly back from the square. A window left carelessly open a few inches, the barrel of a rifle just visible if you knew exactly where to look. She keyed her radio once a silent alert to Wilson that threats were confirmed. Then she adjusted her scope, focusing on the spotter first. He was professional, she noted with grudging respect. Minimal movement, good concealment, proper equipment. This wasn't some local militia. This was someone with training. In the square, Chun and Martinez had stopped, standing in the open as instructed. Minutes ticked by. Alicia divided her attention between the threats she'd identified and the surrounding areas, watching for new movement. A door opened on the far side of the square. 2 men emerged, half dragging a third between them. Even at this distance, Taylor was recognizable, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head despite his injuries. He was alive but hurting, one leg dragging slightly as they forced him forward. Alicia felt a surge of emotions she couldn't immediately identify. Not hatred, not quite forgiveness. Something more complicated, the recognition of a shared past. That couldn't be untangled with simple feelings. She pushed it aside, focusing on the tactical situation. The men with Taylor stopped 20 meters from Chun and Martinez. One stepped forward, hand extended expectantly. Through her scope, Alicia could see Chun's mouth moving, explaining that they needed proof Taylor was unharmed before turning over the drive. The man shook his head, gesturing impatiently. The negotiation was just theater. Everyone knew what would happen next. Alicia saw it first, the spotter on the rooftop shifting position, hand moving to his radio. The shooter in the window adjusting his aim slightly. The men holding Taylor taking a half step backward. She had perhaps 3 seconds before it all went wrong. Breath in, hold, squeeze. The first shot cracked across the valley, striking the spotter center mass before his warning could be transmitted. He collapsed without sound. Breath in. Adjust for new distance, hold, squeeze. The second shot found the shooter as he was still trying to understand why his spotter had gone silent. The bullet shattered the rifle in his hands, continuing through to strike his shoulder, a wounding shot that removed him from the fight without killing him. In the square, chaos erupted. The men holding Taylor dove for cover, dragging him down. Behind a low stone wall, Chun and Martinez scattered in opposite directions, drawing concealed pistols as they moved. Alicia's world narrowed to her scope, breathing, and trigger. The third threat position revealed itself as someone began firing from the modified animal pen. She put a round through the wooden slats, not aiming to kill but to suppress to keep them pinned while Chun and Martinez maneuvered. Overwatch. We need cover fire on the south approach, Wilson's voice came through her headset. Additional hostiles moving in from the tree line. Alicia shifted her aim, finding the new threat 3 figures running in a tactical formation toward the square. These weren't local militia either. Their movement was too coordinated, their weapons too uniform. Professional operators. She fired. Twice in rapid succession. The first round kicked up dirt at their feet, forcing them to break formation. The second disabled the lead man's weapon without hitting him directly. Message delivered. Someone was watching from very far away, someone who could have killed them but chose not to. They scrambled for cover, momentum broken. In the square, Chun had reached the wall where Taylor was held, engaging one captor in hand-to-hand combat, while Martinez provided covering fire against the second. Alicia kept scanning, identifying and neutralizing threats as they emerged. A window that suddenly held a rifle barrel. A rooftop where someone was trying to set up a heavy weapon. Each shot precise, each target carefully selected to disable, rather than kill whenever possible. Overwatch, vehicle approaching from the east, Wilson warned. Technical with mounted gun. Alicia found it immediately, a pickup truck with a machine gun bolted to the bed, racing toward the village. 3 shots in quick succession. The first flattened the front tire. The second punched through the engine block. The third disabled the mounted weapon. The truck skidded to a halt, its occupants abandoning it to seek cover. In her scope, she saw Chun pulling Taylor to his feet while Martinez laid down covering fire. They were moving toward the extraction route, an alley that led to a dry riverbed, where Wilson waited with medical supplies and communications. "Overwatch, we have the package," Chun's voice came through, breathless but controlled. "Moving to extraction point. Need covering fire for 30 seconds. "Copy," Alicia replied, shifting her focus to the routes the enemy would most likely use to pursue. One by one, she eliminated options, a shot that collapsed a wooden awning to block an alley, another that shattered a water barrel to flood a narrow passage with mud. Not killing shots, but strategic ones that shaped the battlefield to her team's advantage. She was back in the rhythm now, the perfect dance of breath and trigger and calculation that had once defined her. 6 years melted away, and she was again the soldier who could see what others missed, who could reach out across impossible distances to change the course of events. Chun and Martinez had Taylor moving at a decent pace now, staying low, using available cover. Alicia provided constant support, her rifle cracking in a steady rhythm that kept enemy heads down and friendly bodies moving. "Package secure at extraction point," Wilson reported. "Medical assessment underway. Primary exfil route compromised, shifting to secondary." That meant the helicopter wouldn't be coming to their planned pickup zone. They'd have to move overland to the backup location, a small plateau 3 miles north where the aircraft could touch down briefly. "Copy," Alicia acknowledged. Beginning displacement. She fired 3 final shots, carefully placed rounds that would keep the remaining hostiles pinned down long enough for her to relocate. Then she began breaking down her position, working quickly but methodically. Brass collected, equipment packed, all traces of her presence erased. The ridge that had seemed so challenging on the approach was doubly so now, with urgency adding pressure to each step. She moved as quickly as safety allowed, rifle case secured to her back, eyes constantly scanning for threats. By the time she reached Wilson's relay position, he had already packed most of his equipment, leaving only the essential communications gear still operating. "Status?" she asked, dropping to one knee beside him. "Taylor's mobile but injured. Possible fractures in his left arm and ribs. Chun and Martinez have him on the move toward secondary extraction. Local forces are mobilizing. We've stirred up the hornet's nest." Alicia nodded, checking her own equipment. Expected response. "Time? 20 minutes, maybe less. We need to move." They packed the remaining gear and began the descent toward the extraction point, taking a route that paralleled the one Chun and Martinez would use with Taylor. The terrain was treacherous loose rock that shifted underfoot, steep drops that required careful navigation, exposed sections where they would be visible to anyone looking in the right direction. Alicia took point, moving with the confidence of someone who'd trained in similar landscapes for years. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: how to read terrain, how to move silently, how to spot danger before it spotted you. They were halfway to the extraction point when Wilson's radio crackled to life. "Relay, be advised we have company." Chun's voice came through, tight with tension. "At least 6 hostiles on our trail, heavily armed. We're pinned down in the ravine half a mile from extraction." Wilson looked at Alicia, the question unspoken but clear. "Coordinates?" she asked, already unslinging her rifle case. He relayed the request, received a response, and pointed to a position on his tablet map. "They're here. Hostiles approaching from the south. Nearest high ground is this ridgeline, but it's—" "I see it," Alicia interrupted, studying the terrain. A narrow spine of rock that would give her a clear line of sight to the ravine where her team was trapped. Difficult to reach, exposed to enemy view, but the only position that would work. "Cover our gear," she instructed, opening her rifle case. "I'm going light and fast." Wilson nodded, already calculating. "You've got maybe 10 minutes before they're overrun." Alicia assembled her rifle in record time, checking each component with practiced efficiency. She took only what was essential: rifle, ammunition, radio, water. Everything else would slow her down on the climb ahead. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, extract without me," she said, securing the last of her gear. Wilson's expression was grim but understanding. "Good hunting, Overwatch." The climb was brutal, nearly vertical in places, with loose rock that threatened to send her sliding back with each step. Her lungs burned, muscles protesting as she pushed herself beyond normal limits. But urgency drove her forward, the knowledge that lives depended on her reaching that position in time. She crested the ridge with minutes to spare, dropping immediately into a prone position and setting up her rifle. Through her scope, she could see the ravine where Chun, Martinez, and Taylor had taken cover behind a cluster of boulders. Beyond them, moving carefully from cover to cover, were their pursuers, men in mixed clothing but with matching weapons and tactics, professional hunters closing in on their prey. Alicia keyed her radio. "Overwatch in position. I have eyes on hostiles. Count as 8, not 6. Professional operators moving in standard search pattern." Chun's reply was immediate. "Copy. We're running low on ammunition. Taylor's condition is deteriorating. Need extraction immediate." "Working on it," Alicia assured her, already lining up her first shot. The enemy had spread out, using the terrain to approach from multiple angles. Smart tactics, making them harder to engage simultaneously. But they hadn't counted on being observed from above and behind. Alicia began systematically disrupting their approach. A shot that shattered her rifle but spared the man holding it. Another that struck the radio on a commander's vest, cutting off his ability to coordinate. A third that kicked up stone fragments near a group trying to flank, forcing them to retreat to cover. Not killing shots unless absolutely necessary. That wasn't who she was, not anymore. Not since that first patrol when she'd learned the weight of taking a life, even to save others. "Hostiles pulling back," she reported, watching through her scope as the enemy retreated to reassess. "You've got a window. Move north along the ravine. I'll cover." Chun's acknowledgement was immediate. Alicia watched as the 3 figures below began moving, Martinez supporting Taylor while Chun provided local security. They moved well despite their burden, using available cover, presenting minimum target area. The enemy reacted quickly, trying to adjust to the changing situation. 2 moved to cut off the northern exit from the ravine. Alicia put rounds in the dirt at their feet, forcing them to dive for cover. Another tried to reach a position with a clear line of sight to the ravine. She disabled his rifle with a precision shot that left him unharmed but unarmed. For 5 minutes, she conducted a masterclass in long-range marksmanship, not through kills, but through the careful application of force that shaped the battlefield to her team's advantage. Every shot had purpose. Every target was chosen with care. The enemy found themselves constantly outmaneuvered by a threat they couldn't locate or engage. "Overwatch package is clear of the ravine," Chun reported. 300 meters to extraction point. Hostiles regrouping behind us. "Copy," Alicia acknowledged. "I'll delay them. Get to the LZ." She shifted her focus to the pursuit, identifying the leaders and targeting their equipment rather than their bodies. Communications gear, weapons, optics. One by one, she degraded their capabilities without taking lives. Below, Chun, Martinez, and Taylor had reached the small plateau where the helicopter would land. Wilson was already there, having moved there. Cached equipment to the extraction point. The team had made it. Now Alicia just had to cover their departure and make her own way to safety. The radio crackled again, not Chun's voice this time, but the pilot's. "Ground team, this is Dustoff, incoming hot. Multiple radar contacts in the area. Extraction window is extremely limited." "Copy, Dustoff," Wilson replied. "LZ is secure. Be advised, Overwatch is still in Overwatch position." A pause then. "Understood. No time for secondary pickup. Overwatch will need to move to primary LZ for extraction after we dust off." Alicia's heart sank, but she wasn't surprised. The mission parameters had always been clear: get Taylor out, whatever the cost. If that meant she had to make her own way to the primary extraction point, a day's travel through hostile territory, then that's what she would do. The sound of rotor blades reached her ears moments before the helicopter appeared, skimming low over the ridgeline to reduce its radar. Signature. It touched down on the plateau in a swirl of dust, rotors still spinning as Chun and Martinez loaded Taylor aboard. Through her scope, Alicia watched Wilson hesitate at the door, looking back in the direction of her position. She keyed her radio. "One last time. Go," she said simply. "I'll make my own way out." Wilson nodded once, visible even at this distance, then climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted immediately, banking sharply to the north before disappearing behind a mountain ridge. Alicia was alone now, in hostile territory, with enemy forces still searching the area. She needed to move, to find a safe route to the primary extraction point where hopefully the helicopter would return for her in 24 hours. She began breaking down her position, working quickly but carefully. As she secured the last of her equipment, movement caught her eye. The enemy forces had spotted the helicopter and were now changing direction, heading toward the plateau where it had landed. They would find signs of the extraction. They would know their targets had escaped, and they would begin searching more aggressively for anyone left behind. Alicia slung her rifle and began moving along the ridgeline, seeking a path that would take her away from the searching hostiles and toward the primary extraction point. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in deep oranges and purples. Soon darkness would provide cover, but also make navigation more challenging. As she moved, her mind returned to that first patrol 6 years ago, how a single moment of clarity had changed everything. One shot that had saved lives and destroyed her own. Now she had come full circle, back to these mountains, back to the skills that had once defined her. The difference was that this time, she was choosing her path forward. Whatever waited at the end of this mission, answers, closure, or just more questions, she was facing it on her own terms. The mountains stretched before her, ancient and indifferent to human struggles. Somewhere to the north, a helicopter carried her team and Taylor to safety. Somewhere behind her, men searched for the shooter who had disrupted their plans. And somewhere ahead lay answers to questions she'd carried for 6 years. Alicia Morgan adjusted her pack, checked her compass, and began walking toward whatever came next. Night fell across the mountains like a heavy blanket, bringing both concealment and danger. Alicia moved steadily, navigating by starlight, and memory, her steps sure despite the treacherous terrain. The primary extraction point was 18 miles north of Journey. That would have been challenging in daylight with proper equipment. In darkness, with hostiles searching the area, it bordered on impossible. But Alicia had done impossible things before. She found a sheltered depression beneath an overhanging rock and settled in to rest until first light. Too dangerous to continue. In darkness, too risky to use any light that might give away her position. She ate a protein bar from her minimal supplies, drank sparingly from her canteen, and performed a careful inventory of what she had: rifle with 26 rounds remaining, sidearm with full magazine plus 1 spare, radio with fading battery, compass, water for perhaps 36 hours if rationed carefully. Not ideal, but workable. She'd survived with less during training exercises. The radio crackled softly with an incoming transmission. She kept the volume low, pressed against her ear to prevent sound from carrying. "Overwatch, this is command," Chun's voice came through, distorted by distance and interference. "Package secured at forward operating base. Medical assistance provided." "Repeat, package secured." Alicia keyed the mic twice, a silent acknowledgement that preserved her position while confirming she'd received the message. "Extraction scheduled at primary LZ, 0600 hours tomorrow," Chun continued. "Be advised, increased hostile activity in your AO. Satellite shows multiple search parties converging on last known position." Another double click from Alicia. "Good luck, Overwatch." "Command out." The transmission ended, leaving her alone with the night sounds of the mountains and her thoughts. So Taylor was safe, mission accomplished, technically. All that remained was for her to reach the extraction point by morning. Simple, except for the miles of hostile territory and the professional hunters searching for her. She closed her eyes, allowing herself 15 minutes of light sleep, the kind that rested the body while leaving the mind alert to danger. When she opened them again, nothing had changed except the position of stars overhead. Time to move. Traveling at night was a calculated risk. Harder to navigate, easier to miss dangers, but also harder to be spotted. She kept to high ground. Where possible, using ridgelines for orientation while avoiding skylining herself against the stars. When descent was necessary, she chose routes with maximum cover and minimal noise. 3 hours into her journey, she froze at the sound of voices carried on the night air. A patrol moving through the valley below her position. She dropped to the ground, becoming part of the landscape, rifle ready but unnecessary if she remained undetected. 5 men passed within 50 meters of her position, moving with the confidence of those who believed themselves unseen. Their equipment confirmed what she had suspected: these weren't local militia or even regular military. Their gear was specialized, their movement disciplined. Professional operators, the kind who worked for entities that didn't officially exist. She remained motionless until they were well past her position, then continued her journey with renewed caution. Dawn was approaching, the faintest lightening of the eastern sky, warning that darkness would soon surrender its protection. Alicia found another sheltered position just as the first rays of sunlight touched the highest peaks. This time, she concealed herself more thoroughly, using natural materials to break up her outline and create a hide that would be invisible to casual observation. From here, she could watch the terrain ahead, planning her route for the night to come. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Twice, patrols passed within visual range of her position, forcing her to remain completely motionless for extended periods. Her muscles protested, but years of training had taught her to ignore such discomfort. The mind controlled the body, not the other way around. As the sun began its westward descent, she checked her map against the terrain, confirming her position and the distance remaining to the extraction point. 8 miles doable in a single night if she pushed hard and encountered no resistance. The radio remained silent throughout the day, which was both expected and concerning. If Chun had more information, she would have transmitted it. The absence of communication meant either nothing had changed, or something had changed so drastically that radio silence was deemed necessary. When darkness fell again, Alicia resumed her journey, moving with greater urgency now that the extraction deadline was approaching. The terrain grew more challenging, steep descents into narrow valleys, followed by grueling climbs up the opposite side. Each step had to be placed with care, each movement calculated to minimize noise and visibility. 4 hours into the night, she reached a ridgeline that offered a clear view of the miles ahead. In the distance, barely visible in the starlight, was a flat plateau surrounded by higher ground, the primary extraction point. She was making good time, ahead of schedule even. If she maintained this pace, she would reach the LZ with at least an hour to spare. Then she saw the light small, moving pinpoints in the valley between her position and the extraction point. Headlamps, carefully dimmed but still visible to her trained eye. At least 3 groups, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested they were sweeping the area systematically. They were between her and safety, directly along the most logical approach route. Alicia studied the terrain, considering alternatives. She could circle wide around the search parties, adding miles to her journey and potentially missing the extraction window. She could attempt to slip between them, relying on stealth and darkness to mask her movement. Or she could create a diversion, drawing them away from her intended path. None were perfect options. All carried significant risk. She decided on a hybrid approach, a flanking movement that would take her around the largest concentration of searchers, followed by a carefully timed diversion to draw the remaining groups away from her final approach to the LZ. The plan took shape as she descended from the ridgeline, moving laterally across the slope rather than directly toward the valley floor. This route was more exposed, requiring her to cross several open areas where moonlight would reveal her movement to alert observers. But it positioned her to approach the extraction point from an unexpected direction. 2 hours later, she had successfully circled around the main search party and reached a position approximately 2 miles from the LZ. The remaining obstacles were a dry riverbed that offered good cover, but was likely being monitored, and a final stretch of open ground. Before the plateau itself, time for the diversion. Alicia removed her spare magazine and carefully extracted 3 rounds. Using her knife, she modified them slightly before replacing them in the magazine. Then she moved to a position with good visibility of the area but poor accessibility, a rocky outcropping that would be difficult to approach quickly. She chambered one of the modified rounds, aimed at a distant rock formation, and fired. The shot echoed across the valley, bouncing between mountain walls to create the impression of multiple shots from different locations. Immediately, the search parties responded, lights converging, movement becoming more urgent as they oriented toward the source of the sound. Alicia waited 30 seconds, then fired again, this time in a slightly different direction. The modified round created a distinctive sound, different enough from her first shot to suggest a second shooter. Again, the search parties adjusted, splitting their focus between what they now perceived as multiple threats. The third shot came after another calculated delay, aimed in yet another direction. By now, the search parties were thoroughly confused, lights moving erratically as commanders attempted to make sense of conflicting information. Alicia didn't wait to see more. The moment her diversion was complete, she began moving rapidly toward the extraction point, using the confusion to mask her approach. The dry riverbed provided perfect cover, its high banks concealing her from view as she moved swiftly along its course. Within 30 minutes, she had reached the edge of the open ground surrounding the LZ. From here, she would be exposed if anyone looked in the right direction. But the search parties were still focused on the area where her shots had come from, their lights visible in the distance as they combed the rocky terrain for phantom threats. Alicia checked her watch. 1 hour until extraction. She needed to reach the plateau and confirm it was secure before the helicopter arrived. Taking a deep breath, she began the final approach, moving in short bursts between whatever minimal cover existed, freezing whenever she sensed movement or heard sounds that didn't belong to the night. The plateau rose before her, a flat expanse surrounded by higher ground, perfect for a helicopter landing, but vulnerable to observation from the surrounding ridges. She skirted its edge, checking for signs that it might be watched or, worse, already occupied by hostiles preparing an ambush. Nothing. The plateau appeared clear. Still, she maintained caution as she approached the designated landing zone at the center of the plateau. Years of experience had taught her that the moment you believed yourself safe was precisely when you were most vulnerable. The radio at her hip crackled to life, making her freeze in mid-step. Overwatch, this is Dustoff, approaching your position, ETA 10 minutes. Confirm LZ is secure. Too early. The extraction wasn't scheduled for another 45 minutes. Something had changed. Alicia keyed her radio. Dustoff, this is Overwatch. Be advised, LZ appears secure but area is hot. Multiple hostile search. Parties within 2 miles of position. Copy that, Overwatch. We've been tracking their movement. Time window is closing. We need to extract now or abort mission. Alicia understood immediately. The search parties wouldn't stay confused forever. Once they realized they'd been led away from their actual quarry, they would reorient toward the most logical target, the extraction point. If the helicopter didn't come now, it might not be able to come at all. Understood, Dustoff. LZ is marked and ready. She quickly set up the infrared marker that would guide the pilot to the exact landing spot, invisible to the naked eye but clear through night vision equipment. Then she took up a defensive position at the edge of the plateau, rifle ready to address any threats that might emerge. The distant thrum of rotor blades reached her ears minutes later, growing steadily louder as the helicopter approached. Alicia scanned the darkness surrounding the LZ, watching for any reaction from the search parties. They had to hear it too. The sound carried far in the mountain air. Sure enough, the distant lights began to change direction, converging toward the plateau. They had realized their mistake and were now racing to intercept the extraction. The helicopter appeared over the nearest ridge, running dark except for the infrared lights that would be visible only to those with proper equipment. It descended rapidly toward the marker, touching down with practiced precision. The side door slid open, revealing Chun in the doorway, motioning urgently. Alicia broke cover and sprinted toward the aircraft, keeping low as the rotor wash buffeted her. Behind her, the first shots rang out wild, inaccurate fire from the leading elements of the search parties, who had spotted the helicopter but were still too far away for effective engagement. She leapt aboard, Chun grabbing her arm to pull her inside as the pilot immediately began lifting off. More shots came, some closer now, pinging off the helicopter's armored underside. The door remained open as Chun and Martinez returned fire, providing covering suppression while the aircraft gained altitude. Go, go, go! Chun shouted to the pilot, finally sliding the door closed as they cleared the surrounding ridgelines and accelerated away from the danger zone. Alicia collapsed into a seat, the sudden transition from high-alert survival to relative safety leaving her momentarily disoriented. Her muscles trembled with a combination of exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Someone handed her a water bottle, which she drained in long, desperate gulps. Cutting it close there, Overwatch, Martinez commented from across the cabin, his expression unreadable in the dim red lighting. Had to take the scenic route, she replied, finding her voice rough. From disuse, status on Taylor? Stable, Chun answered, securing her weapon before taking the seat beside Alicia. Medical team has him at the forward operating base. 2 broken ribs, fractured arm, dehydration, but nothing life-threatening. Alicia nodded, letting her head rest against the vibrating fuselage. The mission was complete. Taylor was safe. She had made it out. Yet something felt unfinished, questions still unanswered. "Those weren't ordinary insurgents," she said after a moment. "Professional operators, high-end equipment, coordinated tactics." Chun's expression tightened. "No, they weren't. Same group that took Taylor, we think. Private military contractors. Working for someone with deep pockets and deeper secrets. Connected to what happened 6 years ago? Taylor seems to think so. He was pursuing something, information about corrupt officials selling intelligence to private entities. Goes back at least that far, maybe further." The helicopter banked, changing course as they cleared the mountain range and entered more open airspace. Through the small window, Alicia could see the first hints of dawn touching the eastern horizon. Another day beginning in a world that suddenly seemed more complicated than she had realized. "He'll want to see you," Chun added, studying Alicia's face in the dim light. "When we land, he asked for you specifically." Alicia said nothing, her thoughts turning to the conversation ahead. "What did you say to someone who had both saved and destroyed your career? Who had continued fighting battles you thought were long lost?" The man she had once respected, then hated, now seemed like a stranger to her, neither hero nor villain, but something more complex. The flight to the forward operating base took just under an hour. When they landed, medical personnel were waiting to check Alicia for injuries, but she waved them off. A few scrapes and bruises were nothing compared to what she'd experienced before. What she needed was answers, not bandages. Chun led her through the small compound, a collection of prefabricated buildings surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. The place had the temporary feel of all military installations in this part of the world, as if acknowledging that their presence was transitory against the permanence of the landscape. They stopped outside a door marked medical. Chun hesitated, hand on the knob. "He's been through a lot," she said quietly. "And not just the recent captivity. The last few years haven't been kind to any of us." Alicia nodded, understanding the unspoken request for restraint. Whatever reckoning waited inside, this wasn't the time for accusations or anger. Taylor had suffered enough without her adding to the burden. The room beyond was small and utilitarian, a bed, medical equipment, a chair beside a metal table. Taylor lay with his eyes closed, one arm encased in a temporary cast, monitors beeping softly beside him. He looked older than Alicia remembered, his face lined with new scars, both literal and figurative. At the sound of the door, his eyes opened. Recognition was immediate, a flash of emotion crossing his face too quickly to identify, before being replaced by a careful neutrality. "Morgan," he said, voice rough from disuse. "Sir," she replied automatically, the old habits of military courtesy surfacing despite everything that had happened. Chun quietly left the room, closing the door behind her to give them privacy. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of their shared history filling the space between them. "Heard you made some impossible shots out there," Taylor finally said. "Just like old times." "Not like old times," Alicia corrected. "I had a choice this time." He nodded slowly, accepting the implicit criticism without defense. "You came anyway." "I wanted answers more than I wanted to hold on to anger." Taylor shifted in the bed, wincing as the movement disturbed his injuries. "Fair enough. What do you want to know?" "The truth," Alicia said simply, "about what happened 6 years ago. About why you let them destroy my career. About what was worth the sacrifice." Taylor was silent for a long moment, staring at the ceiling as if gathering his thoughts or perhaps his courage. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, the command presence replaced by something more human, more vulnerable. "When you took out that sniper nest, you didn't just save your squad. You exposed an operation that wasn't supposed to exist. Those weren't ordinary insurgents you eliminated. They were contractors, American contractors working for a private company with connections to certain government officials. Alicia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. We were being watched by our own people? Not exactly. These were former military who'd found more lucrative employment with private interests. They were gathering intelligence on troop movements, equipment vulnerabilities, information worth millions to the right buyers. And when I took them out, you kicked the hornet's nest, Taylor confirmed. Suddenly there were questions about what unauthorized personnel were doing in that sector, why they were positioned to observe American patrols, who they were reporting to. Questions that certain powerful people didn't want answered. Alicia processed this, pieces falling into place. So when I refused to change my report, when I insisted on documenting exactly what I'd seen, you became a liability, Taylor finished. They couldn't erase the fact that you'd eliminated the threat, too many witnesses, too much physical evidence. But they could discredit you, question your judgment, suggest you'd acted without proper authorization. And you let them do it. Alicia said, the old anger flickering briefly before being subsumed by her need to understand. Taylor met her gaze directly for the first time. I had a choice: fight openly and watch them destroy both of us, or appear to concede while looking for another way to bring them down. I chose the path that kept you alive, if not in uniform. 3 others weren't so lucky, Alicia said, remembering what Chun had told her. No, Taylor agreed, his expression darkening. They pushed harder than you did, kept asking questions even after being warned. Accidents happen in war zones, sometimes even back home. The implications were chilling. Alicia had always believed. Her discharge was the result of politics and scapegoating. The idea that it might have been the lesser of possible consequences hadn't occurred to her. So what changed? She asked. Why come after you now, after all this time? Because I finally found proof, Taylor said, reaching for a tablet on the bedside table. His movements were slow, pained, but determined. Financial records, communication, logs, details of classified information that was sold to foreign entities. Names of officials who facilitated the operations and profited from them. He handed her the tablet. On the screen was a document, a comprehensive intelligence report, with names, dates, transaction records. Alicia scrolled through it, recognizing some names from news headlines, others from military briefings she'd attended years ago. This goes beyond a few corrupt officials, she said, the scope becoming clear as she continued reading. This is systematic. A shadow network operating within legitimate channels, Taylor confirmed. Using military and intelligence resources for private gain, regardless of the cost in American lives. Your squad wasn't the only one put at risk. Dozens of operations were compromised over the years. Alicia set the tablet down, the weight of the information settling over her. And they took you because you found this proof. They tried to buy me first, Taylor said with a grim smile. Offered me a consultant position with their parent company. 7 figures, cushy office. All I had to do was hand over everything. I'd gathered and keep my mouth shut. When you refused, they moved to more direct methods, yes. His hand drifted to his injured ribs. Though I think they still believed they could persuade me, given enough incentive. Alicia leaned back in her chair, trying to process everything she'd learned. 6 years of believing she'd been betrayed by the man who should have protected her career. 6 years of anger and resentment based on incomplete information. Why didn't you tell me? She asked finally. Why let me believe you'd thrown me under the bus? Would you have accepted a quiet discharge if you'd known the truth? Taylor countered. Or would you have fought it, demanded justice, made yourself an even bigger target? He was right, and they both knew it. The younger version of herself would have chosen principle over self-preservation every time. Would have charged headlong. into a fight she couldn't possibly win. "You could have at least let me know later," she said, though the heat had gone out of the accusation. "I tried to protect you the only way I knew how, by keeping you disconnected from what I was doing." Taylor replied, "As long as you were angry at me, as long as there was visible distance between us, they had no reason to see you as a continued threat. It made a certain cold logic, even if the personal cost had been high for both of them. Taylor had sacrificed their friendship, her respect, to keep her safe while he continued the fight on other fronts." "So what happens now?" Alicia asked. "You have the proof. What do you do with it?" Taylor's expression was grim but determined. "There are still people I trust within the system. People with the authority to act on this information if they can be convinced to do so. That's the next phase, getting this into the right hands before they realize what I've found. And my role in all this? That depends on you," Taylor said. "You've done more than enough already. You can walk away now, go back to your life." "I wouldn't blame you." Alicia almost laughed at that. "What life? The one where I fill out job applications that never get responses. Where I exist on the margins, because someone decided my service wasn't worth acknowledging. Or," Taylor continued, "you can help me finish this. Help me make sure that what happened to you, what happened to those other soldiers, never happens." Again, the choice seemed obvious when framed that way. Yet Alicia hesitated, aware that stepping back into this fight meant accepting risks she'd thought were behind her. "I'm not the same soldier you knew," she said after a moment. "I've changed. We all have," Taylor acknowledged. "But some things don't change. Your shot is still true. Your judgment is still sound. And from what I hear, you can still see things others miss." There was a knock at the door before Alicia could respond. Chun entered, her expression apologetic but urgent. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to move. Satellite shows increased activity at multiple sites. They know he's been extracted, and they're trying to track our location." Taylor nodded, already struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "How long?" "Transport arrives in 20 minutes. We're evacuating all non-essential personnel now." "Where to?" Alicia asked. "Secure facility in Germany first, then stateside," Chun replied. "We have people waiting to receive the package." She glanced at the tablet on the bedside table, making it clear what package referred to. Taylor turned back to Alicia as Chun left to continue preparations. "I need an answer, Morgan. Are you in or out? No judgment either way, but I need to know now." Alicia thought about the apartment she'd left behind, sparse, impersonal, a place to exist rather than live. She thought about the rejection letters piling up on her desk, the dwindling bank account, the quiet desperation of trying to build a life without the recognition of her service. Then she thought about the shots she'd made during the rescue, the clarity that had come with returning to her true skills, the sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. "I'm in," she said simply, "but on one condition." Taylor raised an eyebrow, waiting. "No more secrets between us. Full transparency from now on. I need to know what I'm fighting for and against." He considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed, though I should warn you, once you see how deep this goes, you can't unsee it." "I've been living half blind for 6 years," Alicia replied. "I'd rather see the truth, no matter how ugly." The door opened again, this time revealing Martinez and Wilson, both carrying packed gear and looking ready to move. "Time to go," Martinez announced. "Choppers are inbound, 5 minutes out." Alicia stood, helping Taylor to his feet with careful attention to his injuries. As she supported him toward the door, he leaned closer to speak privately. "For what it's worth, I never stopped believing in you," he said quietly. "That shot you made on your first patrol, I've never seen anything like it. Not before, not since, until yesterday." The simple acknowledgement meant more than Alicia wanted to admit. For years, she'd defined herself by that moment, the perfect clarity, the absolute certainty, the knowledge that she had seen what others had missed and acted when it mattered most. To have that skill recognized by the one person whose opinion had once meant everything was a kind of validation she hadn't realized she still needed. Outside, the compound was in organized chaos, personnel loading equipment, securing data, preparing for immediate evacuation. The first helicopter was already touching down, rotors whipping dust into blinding clouds. Chun appeared at their side, taking Taylor's weight from Alicia. "You two are on the first bird," she shouted over the noise. "The rest of us will follow." In the second, "Move." They half-carried Taylor to the waiting aircraft, helping him aboard before climbing in themselves. The pilot gave a thumbs up as the door slid closed, and immediately the helicopter began lifting away from the small outpost that would soon be abandoned. Through the window, Alicia watched the mountains falling away beneath them, the same mountains where she had made those first crucial shots 6 years ago, and where she had now found her way back to the path she was meant to follow. Taylor caught her eye from across the cabin, his expression a mixture of pain, determination, and something that might have been hope. "Ready to make some more impossible shots?" he asked. Alicia felt a smile, the first genuine one in longer. Then she could remember tugging at her lips. "Already have," she replied. "And there are more where those came from." As the helicopter banked toward the border and safety beyond, she touched the bullet casing in her pocket, the talisman she'd carried for 6 years, a reminder of both what she'd lost and what she'd found. The first shot had taken her down an unexpected path. These latest shots had brought her full circle. Whatever came next, she would face it with clear eyes and steady hands. Some debts could only be paid with courage. Some shots changed more than just the target they hit. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.